Great. And I should also mention AgConnect is a for-profit hub and Northwest Food Hub is nonprofit. So again, we have one theme that's going to emerge throughout is that there's like lots of different ways this can impact different kinds of businesses. And so we're starting with ourselves. Next slide, please, Sydney. Really quickly, Sydney already mentioned that this project came out of an existing project. We wanted to just overview that briefly. Last year, there was a project that AQUA funded through a grant funding that they had. We called it the Region to Region Sales and Distribution Project. The focus was on seafood, moving seafood from the Oregon coast, around the coast, and into the inland of the state to increase the availability of local seafood. But of course, as long as you're moving something, you might as well be moving more things. So we were also talking about how to move produce, meat, whatever kind of the specialty of the different regions involved were. That was a slightly smaller project in terms of number of participants. And it ended with, some very exciting findings and things that worked really well, as well as some things that didn't. And that theme also will continue. I also just want to note that like this kind of work has been going on for a very long time in lots of different ways. It's often just very siloed and very local, but conversations between local producers and hubs about how to get things where they need to be, short term, long term, small scale, big scale. That's always been happening. There's always collaboration going on in there. We don't often see it. It doesn't often rise to the, statewide level, but that work's happening. It has happened. It will happen. It continue to happen after this project. We were able to build on some of that existing momentum, certainly, but we do not capture by any means the breadth of what's going on and trying to move product around the state. Um, After AQUA's project ended last year, OCFSN picked it up, and we were able to do this current iteration of the Food Hub Trade Network or Region to Region 2025 project. Jesse and I were co-coordinators on this project, and because there was a little bit more spread of people being involved, we decided to split the project into two cohorts. So we had an inland cohort, which I coordinated with Gorge Farmer Collective, Lane County Bounty, Good Groceries, Klamath Grown, and Umpqua Valley Farm to School. And then we had a coastal cohort rather. The division of these cohorts was fairly, we need a way to split these up in two based on where our businesses are located and our experiences are. But it also came to inform a lot of like what we learned through the project. So that's definitely relevant. Jesse, could you really briefly go over your cohort?
Mhm. So our cohort included some coastal and inland. So it included on the far south, Port Orford Sustainable Seafoods, um, and then Central Coast Food Web, which is in Newport. It included Claskeneye Food Hub, Claskeneye Farmers Collective, I should say. Hannah Kohlberg, Old Moon Farm, which is in Silverton, I believe. Feed 'em Freedom, which is in Troutdale. Hot Mama Salsa, which is in Portland. Beeline, which is in Portland. And so even though we were coastal, we had just a couple of, coastal hubs, businesses, and then, also working within our like Lower Columbia region and Portland. Something else I want to say too that's important is that these cohorts were kind of chosen on previous conversations. And those who had expressed wanting to sell more or be a part of a distribution network of some kind. And what we ended up doing with and maybe Aaron ended up doing this too, but with our coastal cohort, kind of naturally adding some others to partner and work with us to help us think. And that list is as big as the original cohort list. It includes Food Roots in Tillamook and some others.
Yeah, absolutely. Just the official members of the project, not the only people involved at all, would not be possible without a ton of additional suppliers and transporters and thought partners. Um, We also structured our cohorts a little differently. The inland cohort happened to be, this was not intentional, but happened to have more members who had participated in the previous project and had a little bit more experience working together. It also happened to have more larger hubs versus more smaller, like value-added producers or folks who weren't as experienced with being connected to the larger food hub world on the coastal group. So we decided because the inland group was and is very difficult to coordinate schedules. Not that that's ever easy for these food systems people, but particularly challenging to get us all in a room. We mostly functioned on one-to-one meetings or small group meetings, or even just checking in periodically through text or email in order to coordinate orders, transportation, things like that, troubleshooting. We did not do a lot of big group meetings, which was a pretty big change from the previous project. And I do think was effective for making it work in very busy people's schedules as much as possible. Jesse, do you want to talk a little bit about your structure?
Yeah, so we started out having two big group meetings, and then just naturally what happened was similar to what happened with Aaron, was we found it to be to work a lot better to actually meet some of these people in person. So traveling to where they were to see what was happening. Like for example, Feed 'em Freedom, they're in Troutdale, but they had been ordering fish from Trey Finn, who is one of our who is our main fish supplier, and they are located just across the river from us. And so I actually visited with both of these producers, kind of finding out, just really meeting them. And we're going to get into how important communication is and that type of a thing. So we ended up having a lot of one-on-one as well, and we seem to get further with that rather than the big group meetings.
Okay. That's all of our overview stuff. Let's get into the exciting stuff. Sydney, can you next slide, please? All right. So, the way we're structuring this presentation today is talking through our learnings via like what are the steps to initiating a hub to hub relationship and then like a hub to hub network. We'll have anecdotes throughout. We'll try to explain things based on like the various types of experiences we had, but also please feel free to stop us if anything is confusing at any time or there's any immediately relevant questions. We will have time for questions at the end. But that's how we're going to be talking through this stuff today, rather than like a report on exactly what happened throughout the project last year. Next slide. So you're thinking about starting a hub to hub relationship. You're thinking about purchasing from another hub or selling to another hub or perhaps both. When does it actually make sense to do that? Well, in an ideal world, all three of these things are true. It's already simple, it's already profitable, and there's already room for it to develop even further. Sometimes some of these things are true already. I have, in my network and in my personal experience, had times when there really is just somebody coming through from another hub already, and they want to bring product that I already want, and it's easy. And there's little effort, little coordination involved, little additional cost involved. And that's great. That's obviously an opportunity to jump on. However, most often, not all of these things are immediately true. So the question becomes, how can you make these things as true as possible? Or which ones are true now? How much do you understand about your costs and about your potential for development? Um, so is it simple? Moving food is often extremely complicated. Uh, do you already know the steps it's going to take to order product from the hub you're working with, to get that product to you, how those operations line up with your own delivery timelines? When are they fulfilling? When are they ordering? When are you ordering? When are you fulfilling? Is there a really clear, defined need? If all the answer to all of those is yes, you probably should do a hub to hub trade. That's fantastic. That's amazing. You should still check if it's profitable, but that's great. When that's not the case, often these are things that you can work through, which is kind of what we'll be going through the next slides. But it's an opportunity to pause and assess and make sure that you can get to a place where if things aren't simple, at least you understand where they're not simple and where problems are likely to occur. And also where you can clarify things as much as possible, where you can uh, make sure that like you, sorry, getting caught in my own words, but make sure that you are both clear on what's happening basically and where any complications can be smoothed out. Is it profitable? This is possibly my number one biggest thing coming out of this project is we as people who love food and love community are so often excited to be able to get our producer into a new market, to be able to bring a new product in that our customers haven't had access to before. And that's really exciting. We want to work with each other. We want to collaborate. We want to be in community. And that's all great stuff. We're also often so willing and able to discount what our own time is worth, what our own delivery costs are, especially if we're doing it ourselves. It's really easy to feel like a route is making sense to you because you're selling a product at the end of it, rather than operating from a place of thinking through the actual costs involved and making sure that the profit you're making or the revenue you're making is covering those costs. And that's because it takes time to analyze those things. That's because we're emotional, caring people who love the work that we do. But it can lead to a place where we're really undervaluing how much delivery costs for us, how much coordination costs for us. We're maybe not thinking through enough if the product that we want to bring in or that we want to sell is actually priced appropriately to do that. If we actually have a commitment to be able to cover the amount that we're purchasing, or if we're just really feeling like it'll probably work out. Uh, Trying to get some of those things in place first really helps make a relationship between two hubs worthwhile and makes it sustainable in the long run. All of these things that I'm saying are things that you probably think through many times when you're choosing to onboard a producer or a customer or do a new delivery. It's just that it's easy to get caught up in the momentum of like, this is so exciting. We're doing something new. We're really getting connected. And so it's easy to push past your own sense of is the thing I'm doing actually making sense? We don't want to say like you should not be doing hub to hub trades, but we do coming out of this want to say like make sure you're thinking about it, if that makes sense. And then finally, it can develop. It doesn't always have to be able to develop if it's already simple and profitable. But if it's not simple, it's not profitable. Are you pretty sure that you can get it to those places? Are you going to gain new customers and new sales through the products you're adding in? Is the money that you're getting from selling your product to the other hub, does that help support your efforts, not just cover the cost of doing that actual transaction? And can you work together over time to bring down the barriers to doing hub to hub trading? Pausing for a second. Jesse, do you want to jump in with anything?
Yes. So exactly. All of like I love that slide. Can we go back one minute just back to that slide? Because it's just so good. I mean, what Erin is talking about is there is this like excitement that happens when you want to start moving things, and then there are just some realities. Like for example, when we would show there was a route calculator that was developed in the previous iteration of this, and it's still pretty much current. And so showing that, for example, to somebody who wasn't, they do a lot of distribution between actually Beaverton and kind of the rest of the state, and just showing them that route calculator, he was like, "Oh, are you trying to not have me do this? Like, are you trying to push me, away from what you're trying to do?" So I think that some of these conversations, like maybe the route calculator wouldn't work with him, but maybe a different method of, talking about cost may work with him. So I just wanted to bring that into there.
Next slide. All right. Breaking down further from what I was just talking about as simplicity and profitability, what do you need to actually consider when you're working through a possible hub to hub trade or relationship? First, and these, well, as we'll get to, these things can go in many different orders, but first in order of the slide, what products are you thinking about? Um, Hopefully you're starting this train of thought with there's a real reason to do this sale, to have this relationship. And so hopefully products are the forefront of that. In a super ideal world, like the peak of it's simple, it's profitable, you already have a buyer, right? You have a school that's looking for packs of tuna, and you know that another hub has access to those packs of tuna. Great. The complication just becomes actually getting them to you. But that feels so solvable because you know that you have a buyer at the end of it already, possibly even a buyer that you can place an additional transportation fee on their order and they're able to absorb it. This is not obviously always the case, but that's kind of an ideal situation. You know the product, you know that your costs are going to be covered, and then the complication is just figuring out the logistical steps. I think starting with a product is often the way to go because it ensures that you're actually thinking through the value of the thing that you're moving back and forth for the hubs involved, and operating from that place first rather than that, again, that like excitement and wanting to make it happen and all of that energy and momentum that can carry you. You also need to think about the volume involved. And again, we'll get into each of these a little bit more, but are you moving or ordering enough of the product for it to actually make sense, for you, for it to actually pencil at the end of the day? If so, do you actually have a producer who can supply that volume, or do you need to coordinate between multiple producers? If you're coordinating between multiple producers, do those producers have the same quality standards? Are they able to package in the same way? Are you able to kind of professionally get enough of the product to actually meet the demand? This is if you're the sourcing side, obviously, which I'm jumping back and forth between the two, which I hope is not too complicated for folks. Third, distance and logistics. I think this is like the first thing we often think of in moving products from region to region is, okay, well, it's really far from Eastern Oregon to Portland. That's a long trip. And that's true, and that's a huge barrier. But if we're starting with, well, how do we bridge that gap first? Then we're putting the cart before the horse a little bit. Yes, we want to find ways to make that feel less long and be less expensive. But if we're not doing it for a purpose, then we're doing work that we're not ultimately, paying for it within our organization, that we're not being able to build on enough. I come out of this project pretty against the if you build it, they will come approach. I completely see the reasons people get sucked into it, but I think it can be really dangerous. Fourth, relationship. What is your relationship with the hub involved? How are you structuring that functionally between each other? How are you purchasing from each other? Are you operating on courier agreements? Do you have the same quality and standards? And then finally, once you've gotten through all of that, that's the time to start thinking about regularity and frequency. Again, it's really easy to start this conversation with, so many people want this. There's so many places that want to be connected. Let's just get a truck on the road. And if we start there with every Tuesday I'm coming to your place instead of I need apples this week, that's when we get ourselves into positions where we are overcommitting or purchasing equipment or changing operations, hiring staff in ways that we haven't yet supported through our actual sales and purchasing. Next slide. Jesse, if you want to jump in anytime, feel free. All right, this is the dream, right? First, you think about the product. Oh, one slide back. First, you think about the product, then you think about the volume, then you figure out the logistics, then you structure the finalities of the relationship. That all works amazing. So you figure out how to do it more often by looking again at the product and the volume and the distance in the relationship. Wow, it just keeps cycling. Beautiful. Next slide, please. This is what it actually looks like. These things all influence each other. You can't be thinking about the product without thinking about how much of the product you can buy, the price of the product. You can't be thinking about the logistics without thinking about how long the product can sit in storage, how high quality it'll be when it gets to you. You can't think about the relationships without thinking about what you can actually sell your product for at the end of the day, these things all feed into each other. It's very messy. There's a lot of back and forth. So, go into it with that assumption, I think, and you'll be able to navigate it a lot more easily. Um, Thinking it through in a linear way is helpful in the big picture. In that practice, you loop back many, many times. Next slide. Sorry, I'm on my phone because my laptop hates Zoom, and I just dropped my phone. Sorry about that, everybody. Okay, products. When you're thinking through products that make good hub-to-hub sales, especially when you're trying to figure out how to have a route and there are some complexities that you haven't worked out yet, um, generally speaking, we found the easiest products to move have been products that are either refrigerated or are dry storage. That's because organizing frozen transportation is, generally speaking, much more complicated. We've known since back in the Aquifer Region to Region project that the inland of Oregon wants fish. We want to have fish available. We want it in all the hubs. Customers want it. It's an exciting product. And yet, moving frozen product is simply more complicated than moving refrigerated or dry storage product unless you're doing that route yourself and you know that you're going to have the infrastructure to do it by yourself, and that's just already off the table as a problem. Other than being refrigerated or dry storage, products that can be responsibly transported with other products on the route. Do you have the capacity to transport safely both meat and produce? It helps if the meat is frozen, but do you have the ability to keep them separate in a safe way? If you're working with another distributor to do some of or producer or whoever to do some of the delivery, do they have enough refrigerated storage? Do they actually allow the product you want to send on their route? One of the main ways that we've moved things around, especially the inland of the state, has been through pallet shipping with OGC, Organically Grown Company. They have very reasonable fees for a pallet to be shipped. They operate in a lot of the areas that we were moving and continue to move product to and from. It's a great option. They only will ship produce. They will not work with meat. They will not work with fish. Is there special handling involved? I get really excited every spring when I get elderberry flowers from the valley, but that is a terrible product to do for this because they're incredibly sensitive. They go bad so easily. You have to be so careful while handling them. They're not enough in demand. They're like the worst product possible. I just happen to love them. And then the shelf life. If it's going to take time to get from the original hub to you, which it almost certainly will, how long will you have after it actually gets to you to sell it and have it be high quality? Even if it gets to you immediately, if you're buying a bunch at once in order to make the volume worthwhile, how long can you store that before it goes bad? How much time do you have to sell it to make up the money that you've brought in? This is, of course, also all true in the reverse direction as well. And then, of course, demand. What do you actually need more of? We found that for basically every hub in this network, purchasing from other hubs is a huge benefit to their customers. They see increased interest, they see higher orders, they see people staying on who maybe normally would jump off of the ordering system in the winter, for example. It's a great way to kind of even out your season or to just have more variety of storage, shelf stable products in the dead of winter. But you got to be operating from a place of like, can you actually sell this product? Of course. And then price, if you can't sell it, it's not worth buying. There's simply like, we all don't want to be, capitalist focused people, but if you can't add a markup to the thing after you bought it at the price that it's offered at, it's not going to work. And maybe there's something that you can do with that. Maybe you can negotiate a lower price for a high purchase volume. We've moved full pallets of melons and full pallets of potatoes between some of the hubs. And those were able to be cheaper orders because so much was moved. The farmers were thrilled about it. They were happy to discount their price a little bit to the hub. The hub was happy to discount their price a little bit to the following hub. And so they were still able to be sold at a reasonable price. But even a cheap product can quickly become too expensive for your market, having to especially change hands multiple times along the train to get to you. This often also, sorry, one thing on there, this also often means that you're working with larger producers in the region that you're buying from. So one really good example of a product that's worked really well for us is apples coming from Hood River. And the farmer that sells the most of those is the farmer in Odell, which is one of the larger orchards that the Gorge Farmer Collective works with. Um, I think sometimes we as food systems people have a tendency to want to shy away from the like largest person operating in a space. And this isn't the largest orchard ever. This is just the largest one in the Gorge Farmer Collective network that meets their standards, all those things. Um, but that can often be the right person to work with in this kind of case where we're looking for price, we're looking for volume, we're looking for variety in order to make everything else worthwhile. Next slide. Jesse, sorry, do you have anything you want to jump in on?
No, you keep going for now.
Okay,
Thanks.
great. We split the labor on this. I'm not just talking over Jesse, I promise you. Um, okay, moving on from product. Volume, or can you fill a pallet? Uh, there are always costs involved in organizing any sale, of course, any delivery, but the costs of moving things into a region that you're not already operating in are obviously going to be more. And I'm not just talking about delivery fee, but the time for coordination, for vehicles to be on the road, for communication, for organization, packing, delivering, all of these things are additional costs. There's also amazing benefits, which we've already gone over a bunch of, and they are huge and they're great. But I'm always going to come back to, is it actually making sense for you? A great example of a time when we went through a lot of this process. We figured out how to get something somewhere. We figured out that it was in demand. Gorge Farmer Collective had cherries for a brief period. Cherries are, a thing everyone is excited to have basically in their markets, and not many people have actual access to. But one of the hubs we were trying to get it to looked at their own sales and were like, I think we can support bringing in 2 crates of cherries. You're like, well, we would love to get you 2 crates of cherries. And, Gorge Farmer Collective will keep their hub to hub pricing for you. That's all great. However, we're going to have to pay 2 pallet fees to get it from Gorge Farmer Collective to Portland to another hub and then on to you. Can you afford that and still sell those cherries? And of course, the answer was no. I have a kind of starting point rule that I'll sometimes give people, which is at minimum, in most cases, there's always exceptions to all of these rules. If it costs you $55 to get something to you, you want to sell 55 of them because that means you're adding $1 to the cost of every single one of them. This is just like my gut check. Is this logical? Not a like firm, you should always do this, but you really want those cherries, that's great. It's going to cost $70 to get them to you. So to you, for the hub at the end, you're paying $70 in delivery fees. So each of those boxes of cherries is $35 more expensive. It's just not going to work. Volume is really, really required to make this happen. It doesn't always actually have to be a pallet, but you want to be thinking in bigger scope than maybe you are used to thinking in, and you might need to be creative to do that. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to fill the pallet with one product, that you know that you can sell a full pallet of cherries. I can't sell a full pallet of cherries. I brought in a half pallet of cherries and some other products from the Gorge Farmer Collective and from Portland that was able to fill a pallet together and was able to distribute the pallet fee across all of those items rather than just the cherries. But you do want, this is where the aggregation comes in, right? We're also thinking about producers. Are the producers prepared to be operating in this level of volume? There's so many great wholesale readiness resources. They're wonderful, and I think that should be like a baseline for being ready to operate on a hub to hub or region to region level. But maybe even more so, especially if you're working with multiple producers and putting 2 different types of carrots on the pallet for another hub. Hopefully you're seeing that they can be basically equivalent in quality so that the hub can sell them to one customer if they need to. So consistent prices, case sizing, packaging. You don't want the prices to be changing all the time. You don't want the packaging to be different every pack. Having strong food safety and quality controls. When a product is transported farther, the packaging becomes even more important. The food safety and quality becomes even more important. There's more places that can go wrong. And so you want to make sure it's been right from the beginning. You're also, putting another business in the chain of possibly being implicated by it. And that if it comes back up the chain and like there was a food safety issue, it's not something we've had to deal with, thankfully, but like could be really complicated and could be damaging to your hub. And then just available in large quantities. Um, we've talked with some hubs who have producers who really, really want to sell out a region. And then when you dial down into it, it's like, great, I have 10 additional pounds of meat every month. And that's just not going to be enough to make it make sense, not just for the hub to transport the product or for the hub to buy another hub to buy the product, but for the producer to do the work to be involved in that is likely not going to actually make sense unless perhaps it's being added onto a bigger order. The producer's already dropping product. Like there's ways that it can work, but like as a baseline, that's probably not the best fit to build a relationship or a delivery or a route around. And then
Right.
as always, price. I already went through that, but I will not repeat myself. Jesse, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say that that was a challenge, like kind of starting this project, this iteration of this project was like how how small of a producer will we be helping out or helping to fulfill their dream? Because just as it turns out, like if you're a small producer, maybe the best thing, like if you're a very small producer, is just to serve your very local community rather than, moving your product from like, let's say Astoria to Bend. I mean, this is, contingent upon how far do you actually want to go. And I think in the beginning, we could do some aggregation of a bunch of small projects, or products, but that would be a project in itself. Something else that happened was that like there are cheese needs. So, inland wants coastal cheese. And it just so happens like the two coastal cheese people that I went to go and find cheese, it was just such a coincidence. We're like, oh, we just opened up a farm stand and we don't have the capacity to actually sell cheese now beyond where we are. We're selling here. So just interesting, so in terms of volume and in terms of that was just one of the learning things that we went through here.
Absolutely. And just kind of on that point of like people who want to be the right fit but maybe aren't. Another example is, and this is kind of going back to products as well, is I've heard from a couple of different folks that they have microgreen producers in their region who could scale up so easily, would love to sell more, can absolutely do scale. That's a product that's going to go bad so quickly and also can be grown in every region. And so it's that kind of product, even though the producer is ideal potentially, they're great at packaging, they're really consistent, they have the capacity to scale up, but the product itself isn't right. So it's not something to build a route around. Again, like maybe there is a hub near you who you could add that onto, but it's not like the thing to focus on. All right, yes, next slide, please. All right, the meat of it, logistics. You figured out a product, you have the volume, but how are you actually going to get it to from one hub to another? Well, there's a few ways, and we've tried, I would say all of them, in different places and in different ways. You can deliver it yourself. You can pick it up yourself. You can meet halfway. This is, in some ways, the least logistically complicated option if you have a vehicle and you have the staff to be able to do it. It's the one that it's potentially the easiest to underestimate your own costs on. Um, there's a number of hubs doing periodic trips around the state, and it's very easy for them to look at what's in their truck and say, this feels good, this feels right, this feels valuable, and then actually get some numbers back and say, oh, interesting. That's maybe not as my costs are not as covered as I thought. I mean, I because this is a financial thing, I will speak just personally for now. Agricultural Connections does a weekly trip to the Willamette Valley. Or sorry, we used to do weekly. Now we do monthly because weekly was not covered. We do a monthly trip to the Willamette Valley. We pick up product in Eugene. That costs us $500, and that's a 3-hour each way trip. So It's not the longest trip in the world. It's not the most complicated trip in the world, but it's incredibly expensive because we're going over passes. Our vehicles don't have great mileage, especially when they're completely laden coming back. And we don't have any sales happening in the valley to fill our truck on the way out. We do that route is worthwhile for us, but we don't. We have to be really careful about it, basically. And that's I think that number can be surprising to people sometimes that like a 3 hour trip one direction can be that expensive. But that is what our costs are for that trip. Um, so yeah, do your own delivery. That's great if you want to do it, but just make sure that you are thinking through what the actual costs are and you're making sure that those are accounted for somewhere. Partner delivery can be great. You know your producers. Perhaps you have a producer that is already doing a delivery that's near the hub you want to get product to. This happens regularly. We had an instance where an emergency order of cranberries was able to be brought from like the North Coast area to the gorge by Trayfin, who happened to be already doing that drive, and it saved Thanksgiving. Hurrah! That's a great solution. That's really can be really easy, can be really good for everyone involved, and feel great. And often that's a one-off solution if it's a like existing producer or farmer partner. And so you can kind of negotiate those fees in a way that feels really reasonable because they're already driving that whole drive. You can also work with a larger distributor who is already doing that drive. I already mentioned Organically Grown Company, which has been really, really critical for moving product from Portland to Eugene and back, from Portland to Bend and back, from Portland and Hood River a little bit and back. They have routes down into the south of Oregon as well, though we haven't been able to make as much use of them. There's other businesses like that that are values aligned, are doing distribution, and will rent you space. One of those, for example, is there's I actually shouldn't say what everyone's prices are on a recorded call, but there are other people doing those similar routes. There's different fee structures, and so you do have to be careful about that a little bit and understanding what they are. There's routes from Portland to the Eugene area and from Portland to the Bend area where providers will do percentage-based fees. Yes, the map is out of date. Sorry, everybody. I copied it from a previous presentation. Um, they'll do percentage-based fees. So the total value of the order, they'll take a percentage on top of it. It's often like 15%, which can be quite a lot, especially compared to a per pallet fee of like, say, $60 that you might get from a different distributor. These vary so much, and just make sure that you understand what they actually mean for your costs if you're doing them. There is also always the possibility of doing a like large logistics company, not values aligned, but like, you can just call them and be like, I need to get this thing from here to there. And theoretically, they can do it. It can be much more complicated than you want it to be. It can be a lot less reliable than you want it to be. They're kind of on their own schedules and on their own time and are not great about necessarily communicating with you about when they're going to arrive somewhere. So you can make sure somebody is there to receive at a small hub that's not constantly staffed, for instance. But that is an option. They're also often quite expensive if you're not moving multiple pallets at a time. So it's not something that we did in the course of this project, although it's something that like we looked into as a possibility. And then finally, there's cross-docking. Multiple links in the chain, you probably need to cross-dock. Of course, every time you touch another organization, you're incurring some kind of fee or markup on the product. It's still sometimes absolutely the best option. Lane County Bounty has been a critical cross-docking location. They have storage space, they have freezer space, they have refrigerated space, all available often. And so we've been able to do things like get a frozen fruit producer who otherwise would not be able to connect with other folks because the schedules just do not line up, have them drop at Lane County Bounty and then be picked up to go elsewhere, like to Bend or onto Klamath or to Eastern Oregon. That can happen from Lane County Bounty. Jesse, yes, is also talking about Beeline. Do you want to talk about them a little more? They're a great option in Portland.
Yeah, Beeline. So we have there are a number of coastal organizations that that take their things to Beeline, take their products to Beeline, and then Beeline then either distributes them themselves or somebody from inland then comes and picks up from Beeline. And they have a large facility with, dry storage and coolers and that type of a thing. So they were a part of this, part of the coastal cohort. but are just, I think it's Trayfin that is going there every Wednesday. And right now, and there are a couple of others too. But yeah, Beeline is great.
Yeah. Yeah, and I would encourage if there is a if there's a storage facility in your area that does cold storage, they're often mostly pallet based, but they're sometimes happy to work with smaller folks too. So it's worth looking into like who else might be an option in your region that's not someone who's like specifically tied into like the food systems work. Um, Also true of the delivery routes. Obviously, you want people to have the right equipment and the right background and understanding, but being a little creative can really solve problems, especially when you're just trying to fill an hour or two in between when something can get dropped off or picked up, or a small gap between where you are already going and where the hub you're selling to is already going, so that you can get a product transferred. Um, the
Right.
more links in the chain that you have, the more complicated it is, the more expensive it usually is, uh, of course. But a great place to start is just like, where's the end of where I'm already traveling? Where's the end of where the hub I'm working with is already traveling? What's right in there? Is there anyone? And sometimes there's not. Sometimes you have to go to Portland to get it to another place. And that is not, what we want necessarily, trying to limit unnecessary transportation. But think about it this way: if it's been aggregated there, then ultimately that's much less transportation cost than each of those individual producers running that one route from, say, for example, um, the from Bend to Klamath, or from Klamath to Portland, or whatever it is.
Yeah. And I just wanted to say too, like, for example, with us at the Food Web, really small, we can deal with some very small producers. We're talking like just a little bit of shelf space, either in one of our fridges or on our shelves. And so that's really helpful for the small producers. And we do a lot of that here. Like we do a lot of cross stocking and it's helpful.
Yeah. It's definitely a valuable service many folks can provide. Yeah, next slide. Thank you. All right. So your relationship between the hubs that you're buying between, a few key things here. There are a lot of ways to structure your purchasing and delivery relationship with another hub or with somebody who's doing transportation for you. Um, I would say that the most common one that we've seen and worked with is a hub buying directly from another hub, um, and the hub that is the purchasing hub paying any additional costs to get the product to them. So, for instance, when Gorge Farmer Collective sells plums to Lane County Bounty, Gorge Farmer Collective is already delivering into Portland, so they cover that part of the trip. Lane County Bounty is not already going to Portland. Gorge Farmer Collective is not already going down to Eugene, so Lane County Bounty covers the cost of the product being moved from Portland to Lane County Bounty. It can be a pretty, I mean, none of these things are really straightforward, but it can be a relatively straightforward way of operating. Um, it's not necessarily the default for everyone you'll work with necessarily, but it has seemed to be like the easiest format we've seen. It also has been mostly especially in the inland cohort, a full purchase, not operating on commission, not operating on any like Gorge Farmer Collective selling to Lane County Bounty's customer and Lane County Bounty delivering it, a full purchase by the hub from the hub, and then selling from the hub to their end customers. That's definitely not the only way it has to work at all, but that has been the most common way to get to volume that a hub thinks they can sustain, and without making too many additional complications for everyone involved. Another way you can operate, though, is the first hub can sell to an end consumer in the second hub's area, and the hub operates as a delivery partner, as an intermediary, as a broker, as a cross-docking location. All of those things can be done for fees, delivery fees, cross-docking fees, brokerage fees. They can be done by passing that on to the end customer, by passing that on to the seller. There's lots of different strategies there, but making sure ultimately that the costs for everyone are covered is the goal. when we're doing one-off things, it's very easy to be like, oh, I'm just so glad that I could connect you and this other person. And like, that's, I don't need to be compensated for that. I'm already on a delivery route or whatever. But that is not a way to make this work sustainable in the long term. Um, so think through, if you are operating as a delivery partner, what are your actual costs? As I've said many times, what are your actual costs of that delivery? How can you make sure that those are being covered, so that you can keep doing these kind of operations in the future, hopefully, right? The goal is to ultimately be able to build on this and grow and do it more often. There's also the question of quality and standards. Uh, Once again, the kind of specter of, we are all people who really enjoy what we do and are really passionate about it and are really excited to be in community, arises in that, like, it's very easy to be like, this other hub must have basically the same quality and standard controls that my hub has. They must probably hold their producers to the same standards of growing and taking care of animals and all of those things. And that just might not be the case. And that's not a value judgment on anyone involved. It's just that we all are navigating our individual regions and our individual values and our individual histories. So making sure that conversation is upfront can be really, really valuable. If you have an understanding with the hub that you're purchasing from or selling to about what kind of standards they have or what kind of standards they need, not needing to re-vet each of their suppliers is a huge time save that you can get by aggregating products and working with another hub. But if you have different standards and you're not able to like reach a point of agreement about what kind of products they will move on to you, then you do need to do that work of being like, is this actually somebody I'm willing to purchase from and have in my market? Uh, so just getting that stuff on the table is hugely valuable. If you're just doing one trial relationship and you know the product and you know the seller, this isn't stuff you need to dive into super deeply, but it's the kind of thing that over time will build up. And so having it front loaded, or at least knowing that it's something you need to return to, can be really helpful. And then there's all the little things that are so easy to forget in the moment. What time do you expect a product to get there? Who's responsible for ensuring quality while it's being delivered, especially if the hub doesn't own the product that they're delivering for you? If they're just operating as a delivery partner, how do you contact them? When is payment going to be due? Is it going to be, net 30? Is it going to be on delivery? What payment method are you using? When are they open? Do they close seasonally? These kind of things feel like extraneous details, and they can be for a one-off order where you're just getting some information, you're doing a sale that feels really good already. They might not be things that you need to super worry about, but it can become a problem if you're not sure. For example, what if the product gets to you and it's been damaged? Who's responsible for that cost? Are you eating the cost for that? Is the delivering hub eating the cost for that? Or the delivery partner eating the cost for that? Is the selling hub eating the cost? Like, where is that going to end up? And that can sour these kind of relationships really easily, if you're not all like willing to discuss and give grace and figure out a solution that works for everybody.
Erin, we have a question from Madeline.
Hey, so while we're on the topic of fee structures, I wanted to kind of use Erin and I's conversation this morning that we had as kind of a thought experiment, because I feel like a whole nother layer of the fee structure is Erin's Food Web or Food Hub is for profit and ours is not. So it's uncharted territory on how Erin and I quickly realized our hub is on commission, so we don't buy anything. But quickly, Erin and I realized that's probably not going to work for all of the different schedules that the hubs involved are on, when people can buy food every other week from us, and we're only picking up from Lane County Bounty in theory once a month. How do we stay in our nonprofit format of holding consignment, but making it in a way that also works for Erin's business model? And how do the two coexist? And how do we mitigate our risk, I guess?
Yeah. Exactly. How do you? Exactly. Yeah, I mean, we were talking about this morning, and I don't have like a perfect answer for that off the top of my head, unfortunately, because I'm not as familiar with how nonprofit requirements work. Um, I think like the main thing that we've seen that's worked pretty well is buying in some back stock. Um, and what I don't know is that okay for a nonprofit to do? Is a nonprofit allowed to be like, okay, well, I purchased some flour and I have it in-house and I'm not purchasing it on commission. I know that there is a nonprofit grocery store in our region that does that. I don't know if they have a special situation for some reason. Um, but if not, then yeah, I think building into this slide, like it's about having that conversation and being like, okay, well, we do need it to be on commission. So how do we structure the purchasing so that we can pay it back over time as we get orders in, and we have the cash flow to be able to pay it. Cash flow can be an issue too, even if you're not a nonprofit, obviously. Um, but yeah, I believe nonprofits are able to purchase in, but like even then cash flow can be the problem. And so are you able to structure like we're going to buy this much into inventory so we can get the volume so it can make sense for everybody, but we'll pay it, 1/3 net 30, 1/3 net 60, 1/3 net 90, so that we're spreading out the risk or spreading out the cost to our bank account over a period of time is a thing that you can do. Obviously, that requires a lot of trust on both sides. But I do think there's usually a solution to these kinds of things. It looks like there's some folks in the chat saying that they are nonprofits who are able to purchase an inventory, which is great to hear.
Yeah, thank you for that, Erin.
Yeah, of course. And thanks for bringing that up. I was thinking about you when I was reviewing this slide, Madeline. Anyone else want to jump in with a question, or Jesse, you have anything?
Yeah, can someone give me a little bit feedback on how do you gauge interest in a product? Is it through pre-sale options or yeah, how do you go about that? Seeing if it's something your customers are interested in. Is it super casual or
Can I jump in on that one?
Yes,
great?
please.
I think that one way to do is look at what has already sold. Like look at what's sold over the last year. And also talk to your customers. So we do regular surveys here, and you can easily just like let people know. Sometimes you could take a guess. For example, we do pop-ups here almost once a week now. We let everybody know we're going to be here. That might be a product that we haven't sold before, and then they will come. So definitely reach out to your base, reach out to the customers that are on your email list, and look to see what's happened in the past, like in the last year as well. That's one way.
Yeah.
Thanks.
If you have also a regular reciprocal relationship, you might be able to say something like, can we do this on commission? Or can we bring in this amount, really hope it works? And like next time you're here or next time we're meeting up, if it just didn't work, can you buy the product back from me or not charge me for that portion of the product that I'm returning to you? If it's like, obviously this has to be like a shelf stable good pretty much. Pre-orders are great. And then the dream one is always like you have a wholesale customer who wants to buy enough volume that it just like makes everything else make sense, and everything else you get to add on is just for fun that you get to try out with your customers. That's not usually where people are operating from, but it does happen. Schools will sometimes be really interested in purchasing a specific product, or institutions or restaurants. But yeah, and I'm seeing customer surveys and commissions also from the chat. But there are a lot of ways, and then it also is always some level of risk because people will always tell you they want stuff and then not buy it as much as you thought they were going to. That's always can be a problem.
So I
All
can
right.
ask one more question and I'll stop hijacking the PowerPoint. But Carrie, can you explain how you make that attractive to someone as far as holding a new product on consignment like that before committing to purchasing the product? I guess what makes it a win for them and a win for you when you do something like that?
Usually they're a new producer, so they don't have a lot of sales outlets. And
Mhm.
so they know we have the reach and the potential to increase their sales. So often we'll just suggest that we try it for a 3-month period on consignment. And we do a physical inventory that they can see at all times, once a month, so they know what's selling. They still get pick lists through our marketplace, so they know what's selling. And then we write them a check once a month. And then if we find that it's slow moving, we kind of just set a date to follow up and discuss how we want to move forward after that time period.
Okay, thank you.
Awesome. Next slide, please. Now I promise we're getting close to the end, so we have more time for Q&A. But all right, we're at the fifth step in my terrible non-sequential step of how you think through these sales, which is regularity and frequency. I just want to highlight again that this is at the very end of the process. It's totally enticing to say we're just going to start doing this route, and if you build it, they will come. And that is how you end up committing to costs that you are not covering. When you already have some level of all the other things built in, and then you say, now we're going to build it and more people will come, I think that's something that completely happens. But if you start with the route and then find the products, you're potentially setting yourself up for a big problem. Unless, of course, you're grant funded for that route completely and it's totally covered and you know how you're going to build it up over time. And then that's amazing for you. I'm so excited for you. Can I get some product on your route? So the first thing when you're trying to figure out regularity and frequency, you just did you found the product, you did the volume, you did the producers, you got the logistics sorted, you figured out how you're doing your pricing and your relationship, you finished the sale. Did you both make a profit on what you moved? Did it actually work for both of the hubs? If not, what didn't work? Was it complicated in a way that you can simplify? Do you just need to sort to have more product to move at once for it to be actually worthwhile? Was one hub driving a distance that didn't actually make sense to them? For instance, maybe it doesn't make sense for Klamath Falls to drive to Eugene and to Bend periodically, but we can aggregate the product they would have gotten from Eugene to Bend, and then they can do one trip. And that ends up making the Lane County Bounty to Klamath relationship more worthwhile. These are kind of like the ways to make sure that if you're going to do something regularly, you're actually making a profit on it. And then once you're all at, yes, this is working for us, then how can we do this more often? How often do we do it? And then you return to my original list of products, volume, logistics, relationships, and you figure all those out again on a what if we're planning to do this periodically level. How often can we do a delivery and still get the volume that we need to make it work? Does doing a delivery more often mean that we can sell more product because we know we'll have it more frequently? Great. Then after you've proved that, that's when you probably want to add in more delivery routes. Do you need new tools, equipment, operations to get this stuff done? I think this really has to be the absolute last question, unless there's already a reason that you're going to expand your tools, equipment, or operations, or they're covered in some way. Once you've proven that it's doable, once you've proven that it can work for you, that's when maybe you think about investing in more staff time, another vehicle, expanded storage space, because you know that you actually have a use for it in the end, and it's going to ultimately profit for your business. So you can keep doing interregional sales, and so the cycle can keep virtuously cycling upwards. All right, next slide. Great, you've done a hub-to-hub sale, but you really want to be in a network. Isn't this the Food Hub Trade Network? What do we do for there to move from one to the other? Next slide. The thing about a hub network is it's a bunch of hub-to-hub relationships, ultimately, at the end of the day. A network is nothing but a bunch of individual relationships all connected to each other. And so it's really the same process over and over, but with new people every time, or adding them onto the chain, or connecting them in a circle. There's lots of ways that, or having a spoken wheel approach. There's lots of ways it can look geographically, but ultimately you're doing the same calculation every time of is this relationship worthwhile for both people involved? Is it sustainable? Can we keep building on it together? My general suggestion is if you've done a route that works, then can you add on to it? So we do our Eugene route regularly, and our can we add on to it is what Madeline and I were talking about this morning, is can we connect Newport and Central Coast Food Web to Eugene, and then they're connected via me to Bend and possibly on to Klamath and possibly on to other folks. But if you focus on one link at a time and make sure each link makes sense, that's when, again, you're not getting in above your skis. Also, it's really tempting to think about solutions that are grand and exciting. Technology comes up very frequently in this kind of conversation. Like, what if we had an Uber for moving food around the state? Is something I've heard a lot. The problem with technology as a silver bullet, it'll save us, is that it still requires the same level of like interpersonal figuring out the individual chains before it can work. Like even if you have the Uber of moving food and it works perfectly somehow, you still have to get people onboarded into that system. That's still a human to human approach. So starting small, starting low tech before you invest is really helpful. Knowing who you're working with is huge. I feel like that maybe feels too obvious to even say, but like if you're working with another hub and you want to work with them more, or you want to work with the hub that they work with, what's on their seasonal availability sheets? What do they have? When do they have it? How can you build that into your next order? How can you sell what you have to them? Knowing what you need, what you have access to, what your partners need is infinitely helpful in that. And then just knowing who and when to reach out. Finally, I've been very like, think things through, take a lot of time to make sure that you're doing it properly. But sometimes you really just have to commit something and give it a shot and then get all the data on it and give yourself the best situation that you can by, trying to pile on as many sales or as many orders as possible onto that and use that to figure out what else you need to try. This isn't a risk-free activity, but it is something that hopefully we can make sustainable. All right, finally, last slide. Just some broad themes that we've seen throughout this project that we wanted to pull out really quickly before I finally let questions start. The humanness, I was just talking about this, but hub-to-hub value chains are made up of people, often very busy people. The more comfortable you are working together, the easier it's going to be. The more you understand when you can get in touch with someone and how, the easier it's going to be. But also, the more you know going in that there's going to be idiosyncrasies and histories and personality quirks that are going to influence how you work together, the less that'll impact you dramatically in a negative way. We're all people, we're all trying to do something that's challenging, and often we need to give each other grace around that when we're trying to work together in a really new way. Scale is huge, not just in the volume of product moved, but in the really, really different experiences that different people have. So it's great if you are a super established hub in a well-connected metropolitan area with a big customer base and a lot of cash flow, and you can quite easily get product to you, pay for that product, stock it as long as you need to, store it as long as you need to. That's the dream. But many hubs are not located in Portland or are not don't have enough space to store or do not have a huge customer base, and that's completely fine. But it is realistically, it's more challenging. Like, we don't want to come out of this saying like everyone can and should be doing this work. There are situations where it probably does not make sense to be thinking that much about hub to hub trading until you have things like storage facility of some sort, whether it's just like one fridge or a chest freezer, but some kind of storage access in place, or whether you have a van, a refrigerated van, without having some kind of key infrastructure or customer connection or producer connection. It's going to be much more expensive. It's going to be much harder to coordinate this work. And so it is much less likely to be worth your time to do it. Some of the conversations I've had through this project have actually ended up not being about moving product to somebody at all, but about how to set up their organization so that they can be in a place where it makes sense for them to move product across regions. And then finally, it's always going to be iteration. It's always going to be on some level trying to figure out everything as best you can, but then throwing it at the wall and hoping that it sticks, and figuring out what actually happened and what actually it cost you, what actually the time it took, how your sales actually looked, and then working with your partners to find solutions. Don't force it. Don't do things. Don't try to be someone you're not. But just try again. Really is the ultimate region to region theme, I would say. And with that, I think Q&A, last slide. Jesse, you want to throw anything out there at the end?
No, this was great. This was great. Thank you. Yeah.
You guys, this was amazing. I just want you to know that Lauren and I were messaging back and forth about what gold this information is, especially just key little bits of information like, I don't know, you had to use 2 different service providers to get 2 boxes of cherries across the state, and that was going to cost too much. It was going to be $60 each time, and that made your cherries $35 a case. Like, we don't see that information very often. So I want to start out with thanking you guys for being so upfront and honest about what you learned, sometimes maybe painfully, maybe other times not so painfully, but this is really important information. And then I will open it up to questions. Who has questions? I know you do. We've got one from Carrie and then Jesse.
You know me, I always have a question.
I know.
I put it in the chat early on because I was just thinking about when you started venturing into region to region distribution, did you have to change your markup or your pricing structure? And I'm wondering how much, that had to shift, or do you just apply all of that cost to your customer who's buying it?
Great question. One thing that we've trialed amongst, God, my dang phone again. Sorry, everybody. One thing we've trialed among some of the hubs is a specific hub-to-hub markup, which is lower than the wholesale markup, which has been huge. It's obviously risky in that my refrain over and over in this presentation was like, make sure this is actually making sense to you. And if you have a low markup, is it actually making sense for you? But that's been a huge help in making it possible to apply a fairly standard markup to the products involved and still like make the usual margin off of them, or perhaps discounting them a little bit, but knowing that that's going to be worthwhile. Like, I would say one great example of a product that I never make my full markup on that comes from out of region is berries. Getting berries to Bend is a logistical nightmare. They don't last, obviously. They're delicious. Everyone wants them. So I did have to adjust my markup in order to account for just like what they'll actually reasonably be purchased at. But having them is huge in terms of actually maintaining customers and keeping people excited over a long period of time. So it kind of works out in other ways. But yeah, I think with careful approach, you can maintain margins. You can pass some of the costs on, even depending on the cost of the product and how much it's costing you to get from one place to another. That's usually my goal, and also the goal of most of the inland hubs is to be able to kind of add a little bit to the cost to get the markup to be the margin to be fairly standard. I think being a little bit flexible is helpful, though, for sure, especially if it's a product that is really, really going to help expand your reach or get people to order more or things like that.
Jesse, you had your hand up.
Me?
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't, but I have a question.
Okay.
Questions. So many questions came out of this whole entire process for us. Again, because we are a hub, like we're a food web, but we're also a food hub operating in Astoria. And So one of the things that happened was looking for products that we might want here that we don't have in Astoria. And Erin, this is a question for you. I don't think we talked a lot about different foods. I don't know if we ever talked about hazelnuts. So for example, let's say, well, I have customers that want hazelnuts. Okay. And we're in Astoria. So if we wanted to order hazelnuts, there are a few different ways we could do them. I could order them directly from, a hazelnut farmer. I could also, one option would be to work with a distributor or, part of this network that we already these that we already know. How would you recommend somebody like us do that? Like just want one product and maybe a lot of it. And I'm talking about like either doing some pre-orders or just getting it. But what would you do if you were me? Would you get it from the farm themselves, or would you look to see what distribution's already happening between there and here?
Yeah. Great question. I would start probably with, if you know there's a farm you want to work with, or no, a producer you want to work with, and you know that they have some distribution already happening throughout the state, which is true sometimes for larger farms, especially those that are doing any value added packaging themselves, which is often true for hazelnuts. They might already have a way of getting the product to you. Obviously, we all love buying farm direct. We love buying from our fellow hubs, but sometimes the way to do it is the way it's already working, right? They might have a relationship with a distributor of some sort and be perfectly happy with it and thrilled for you to purchase it from there. So that's always a good place to start. If that's not the case, or if they are working with a distributor, but they don't feel like the distributor, pays them fairly, which is frequently an issue, and they would love to try getting something from them to you in a different way, then that's when probably it makes sense to think about their options. Often, again, especially folks that are a little bigger, you will be able to get stuff to somewhere a little bit closer to you, and then it might be easier to get it from there. Like they might be able to get it to Portland, and then you could have someone pick it up in Portland when they're already in Portland for other reasons, or perhaps you have a farmer that's in Portland that can bring it back. If it's something that you're going to purchase through another hub, then that's when you probably go through all of the steps of like, okay, how do we get all of those logistics, and we make sure the pallet's big enough and blah 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 blah. But there are folks, like, I don't want to erase these people. There are people who are already moving their product around the state and are happy with the way they're doing it and are able to get it to different hubs without needing a trade network. Maybe in the future, like, that'll be a better option. That'll be more values aligned and better for the producers, and that would be amazing. But like, we also live in the real world right now.
Yeah, we do. And it would also it would open up opportunities to contact other hubs too, like us doing a big order. So, okay, thanks.
Other questions? I'm kind of curious from both Jesse and Erin. Have you ever experienced a purchase that turned out to be an epic fail? You couldn't get the product in on time. It showed up in poor condition, and you and your hubs had to navigate some struggles, or you did it and it was just like, that was so much work. I'd never want to do that again.
I have
Without throwing anybody under a bus, but
I have
yes,
a great
I'd love to
only
hear.
only throws myself under the bus, so it's perfect. One thing that I didn't mention, because I was already talking a lot, is that something that's been intersecting with this project is the Oregon Farm to Institution Collaborative's work to work with Lane County Bounty, Ag Connect, and Gorge Farmer Collective to sell product often into Portland institutions. As part of that, Ag Connect sent 2 big crates, like 2,000-pound crates, I believe, of melons to Gorge Farmer Collective to distribute to schools. The first time we did this, we were like, great, we got the big crates, so we got the cheaper pricing for you. We have the shipment figured out. Perfect. It's heading to you. Great. And all of that happened. And then they got the melons and then realized that they needed to pack the melons in 30-pound cases for their customer. And so they ended up having to take these huge crates and put basically one giant watermelon in each crate, in each box that they were making, and then stack all these boxes with melons moving around inside of them and get them back on their truck and send them to their customer. And that was a staffing nightmare, and that was a logistical nightmare, and the melons fell over, and no one's happy. And how much did the boxes cost? God forbid. And no one's happy at the end of that. And it's just an example of like, sometimes you really got to think through all the details before you agree to what you're doing. Because we could have brought the product in boxes, but we were like, what they want is the cheap price, so we're going to get them the cheapest price. So that was a failure on my part of not understanding what they needed, but also was just all of us being a little optimistic about what we could do and then being smacked in the face with the reality of it.
Thank you. I feel a little bad for laughing. I can see what happened, and so thank you for sharing that. It's good to know that there are epic fails to learn from. Do we have any other questions from this group?
And it's not necessarily hub to hub, but this conversation has sparked an idea that even if it's not transportation, it seems like a cool idea playing off of Jesse's example with the hazelnuts in order to get wholesale pricing to communicate with other hubs to create enough volume for an order to get better pricing from a distributor such as like Hummingbird, or we were talking about flour earlier. It seems like there could be value in those kinds of relationships as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say yes. And also through this process, and Madeline, we should definitely talk some more about being coastal food webs.
Yeah.
Something that happened is beans. So dried beans are a need in our region. And one day I took a nice trip to Feed 'em Freedom Foundation, not even meaning to talk about beans, talking about a number of other things. And then as it happened, they said, "Hey, what do you need out there?" And I said, "We need some dried beans." And they went to their fridge and they took out some. They've been working with a producer that I wouldn't have even known about with these beans. So there are opportunities, as Erin was talking about, just in having these conversations and in meeting people as well, and learning what their capacities are, what their needs are, what yours are as well. So the opportunities can come from those.
That's awesome. Did you guys find that really you ended up using third-party services of varying stripes more often than getting on each other's trucks?
I would say it comes out about even. Most of the time that third-party services were used, which was in a lot of the sales, there was some element of also being on each other's trucks. So it was like a combination to get it there. But actually it tips a little bit into the third party over the being on each other's trucks. That was probably the slight majority. Part of that is obviously also like the largest hubs and the hubs that had most experience were hubs that are very well connected by organically grown company already. And so it was like extremely easy to rely on that versus product to and from like Bend and Klamath is not a route that, a third party necessarily is already doing. And so we had fewer of those routes. And also when we did, they were basically just in our own trucks. Or some of those kind of smaller routes are sometimes in like a partner farmer's truck, but the distribution corridors that are already being really well covered by third parties, the using those third parties was the easiest way to do it, with the limitation that like you can't move fish through organically grown company, for instance.
That's an interesting question because we thought about that like internally in the very beginning of this project, was how we could use third parties to help what was already happening here. And we never did because we couldn't get the costing to work out.
Well, thank you. We have time for one more question, if there is one more question. Otherwise, thank you both for this amazing presentation. I feel like I learned a ton. I think we all learned a ton. So I really appreciate it. So yeah, see you guys in like 3 weeks because we've got 2 meetings this month. This was worth waiting for, though. See you
Thanks,
guys next time.
everybody. Thanks, Sydney.
You.
Thank you,
Thank
Sydney.
you.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.